The US and Europeans almost destroyed Hawaii in just 247 years. And it all started on January 18, 1778, when British explorer James Cook first sighted the Hawaiian Islands. He was the first recorded European to set foot in Hawaii. While exploring the South Pacific with his crew in 1778. And the first place he landed was on Kauai. He named the islands the Sandwich Islands in honor of the Earl of Sandwich, one of Cook's financial backers. The iron on his ships, as well as the crew's metal tools and cooking utensils, interested the native Hawaiians, who were unfamiliar with the commodity. Okay. So when Cook later returned to the islands on a different exploration, however, he took advantage of the trust and incited the Hawaiians against him. After he discovered a smaller boat stolen from his ship, Cook ordered his men to kidnap the elderly Hawaiian king in retaliation, which incited the Hawaiians against the Europeans. Okay, now they forced the captain to retreat from the islands, but bad weather compelled Cook's ship to soon return to the beach, where an angry mob killed him and most of the crew. Now the next event I'm going to talk about, the next period of history, is the time of the missionaries and whalers. And they brought disease and other problems to Hawaii. In March of 1820, a group of Protestant missionaries traveled to Hawaii and began setting up churches. And then missionaries from other religions followed. Many natives adopted their practices and belief systems. In addition to churches, missionaries built schools, and through their descendants started a social class of white elites in Hawaii. Okay? One of them was Dwight Baldwin, also Hiram Bingham, and Hiram and Sybil. Dwight Baldwin was a doctor, by the way. And when there was a smallpox, epidemic, I think it was 1833 or 53, I can't remember exact date, 1853. There was a smallpox epidemic. There was a vaccine, and he administered the vaccine. He went all over to Hana, he went to Lanai, Molokai, all over Maui to administer the vaccine. And so he saved a lot of people's lives on Maui, but a lot of people on Oahu and other islands died from smallpox. When the whalers came to Hawaii around the same time as the missionaries, and the whalers were only in Hawaii, mainly in Lahaina, for a short period, like I think it was 1830 to 1860 or 33 to 63 or something like that. But their differences in lifestyle caused substantial conflict among all three groups. As the missionaries attempted to create laws to keep the sailors in line, whalers demanded the right to gamble and hire native women for sex work. Okay? Well, as you can tell, there was a lot of conflict. The whalers' desire for familiar foods also forced the island to obtain non-traditional Hawaiian foods, including sugar, potatoes, and meat. The foreigners also brought diseases such as measles, venereal disease, and smallpox to Hawaii. By 1853, roughly 230,000 native Hawaiians had lost their lives. Okay. By 1810, Hawaii's main 8 main islands, had united to form a single kingdom under the rule of King Kamehameha I. However, traders from France, Britain, and the United States influenced the islanders by supplying them with guns. The foreigners also convinced them to sign a free trade agreement, which entitled giving away Pearl Harbor and granting most of Hawaii's lands to sugar plantation owners. Okay. Now, non-native residents didn't like the Hawaiian form of monarchy. And when David Kalakaua became king in 1874, they felt threatened by his attempts to reduce the missionary party's power. Okay, so now, in 1888, foreigners used the threats of force to establish a new constitution. Some party members formed a group called the Hawaiian League in 1887 and drafted a constitution which would remove power from the king and give it to the legislature instead. The so-called Bayonet Constitution also took away voting rights from Native Hawaiians and Asian citizens who owned neither money nor land. The League then coerced Kalakaua to sign the Constitution, threatening him with force from a militia if he didn't comply. So that was the Bayonet Constitution. He was forced at gunpoint to sign this Constitution, giving away a lot of his power and and the right to vote to a lot of Hawaiian people. Now, the non-native businessmen staged a coup and took over the Royal Hawaiian government. That's another after Kalakaua. The Hawaiian queen Liliuokalani abdicated her throne to avoid bloodshed. Okay, now King Kalakaua. This is now after Kalakaua was Liliuokalani assumed the throne in 1891, when the king passed away. As queen, Liliuokalani attempted to restore the monarchy's power and return voting rights to the native Hawaiians, but the self-imposed white legislature refused to pass it. So she wanted to reverse what happened in the Bayonet Constitution and bring back the power to the monarchy. Okay? But that pissed a lot of people. Fearing the possible loss of control, a group of 13 men from the United States, Germany, and Britain formed the Committee of Safety. Backed by the U.S. military, the group of businessmen with stakes in the pineapple and sugar industries staged a coup in January 17th of 1893 to overthrow Liliuokalani's rule. Okay, so that's what happened at that time. Now, the coup had about 1,000 supporters in Hawaii, and the U.S. sent a ship, that was the USS Boston, with more than 120 Marine Corps members for support as tensions grew. And the U.S. Minister John L. Stevens was in cahoots with these guys too. Now, a policeman died from a gunshot while trying to stop the committee's unofficial militia from illegally acquiring arms. Community members took advantage of the confusion and ran into a government building claiming they were now in charge. You can imagine the confusion that was going on at that time. The U.S. Minister to Hawaii, as I mentioned, John L. Stevens, took the group's side and recognized committee leader Sanford B. Dole, who later became the president of the Republic of Hawaii, a relation to the founder of Dole Foods, that's James Dole, his cousin, as head of this new provisional government. Okay? Now, Queen Liliuokalani stood down from fighting the U.S. actions of 1893 with force, realizing many might die if she resisted the coup. So she saved a lot of lives by, stepping down. Meanwhile, as leader of the new U.S. provisional government in Hawaii, Sanford Dole began the process of annexation by submitting a treaty to the U.S. Senate. So immediately after the provisional government, that was their objective or aim, was to get annexation of this new government. Okay. Now, several congressmen realized the Native Hawaiians didn't support the annexation, and even President Grover Cleveland spoke out against the idea, supporting Liliuokalani's return to the throne. He sent a new minister to represent the U.S. to Hawaii. But Dole refused to stand down, forming the Independent Republic of Hawaii in 1894. He told President Cleveland, this is out of your jurisdiction. Because, Hawaii was not a territory or state at that time. Okay. So, since President Cleveland didn't want bloodshed either, he decided not to send in troops. However, Native Hawaiians took matters into their own hands. In 1895, they attempted their own coup, but did not succeed, costing several lives in the process. And that was led by Robert William Wilcox, the rebellion. And I have another video talking about the rebellion against the Republic of Hawaii at that time. After the new republic government arrested Liliuokalani, they accused her of knowing and having knowledge of this rebellion with treason, and charged her with treason. She officially abdicated the throne, and she basically abdicated to save the lives of Robert Wilcox and there was 5 others, 6 of them total. So she abdicated to save their lives. They're gonna be killed. Sugar, okay. The next thing, sugar dominated Hawaii's economy and pushed natives off their land. Now, sugar was a booming thing, and that was mainly what they were trying to, the planters were afraid that when Liliuokalani wanted to, restore the monarchy, powers of the monarchy, they were afraid of that. Okay, so sugar was the main thing back then. Now, when the missionaries in Hawaii realized the islands were ideal for growing sugarcane, they convinced the Hawaiian monarchy to sell them land. Sugar plantations cropped up all over the islands, run by white people wealthy enough to afford the property. Okay. The plantation owners hired workers from nearby Asian countries such as Korea, Japan, and China. Now, the Chinese came in 1855, and Japanese came in 1866. That was the Ganon Mono. And the Filipinos came in 1906. That was the Sakata. Though some set up their business and returned to America to live, a few stayed behind in Hawaii. Actually, a lot of them stayed behind in Hawaii and set up business in Hawaii. By 1900, sugar plantation owners dominated Hawaii's economy, despite comprising only 5% of the island's residents. Okay, so those owners only comprised 5% of the total population. Their plantations grew, forcing Hawaiians to give up their land. At the end of the Civil War, the U.S. government helped Hawaii's sugar economy grow by offering generous import rates. However, when Congress passed the McKinley Tariff in 1890, sugar plantation owners took a hit and sales fell. This gave them more incentive to annex Hawaii and nullify these tariffs. And that was the main incentive for annexation, was so that they wouldn't have to pay tariffs on their sugar. So they could, put more money into their coffers. So that's what happened. Now, another thing that happened was the Spanish-American War, and that convinced Congress to annex Hawaii. Okay. Since President Grover Cleveland refused to act towards annexing Hawaii, the task fell to his successor, William McKinley. So William McKinley was all in favor of annexation. In 1897, McKinley signed. First time they tried to pass it, it failed. They didn't have a majority vote in the Senate, so it couldn't pass. But the second time, it passed. Now, in 1897, McKinley signed a treaty with the Republic of Hawaii, which proved helpful to America when the Spanish-American War began. And that was mainly because of Pearl Harbor, as we will see. American troops fighting in the Philippines took advantage of Hawaii's location, drawing a treaty to establish a military base at Pearl Harbor in 1887. The region, though the official base didn't begin construction until 1898, played a crucial part in the military's operations during the Spanish-American War, which helped convince Congress to annex Hawaii. So that was the thing that helped to annex Hawaii, is the fact that it was Pearl Harbor was a strategic location for them. And that was called the Newlands Resolution. I cannot believe Hawaii being annexed by a majority vote in Congress. It's like annexing another sovereign nation through a majority vote in Congress. I just shake my head today. That's unbelievable. That's illegal. Anyway, officially annexed in 1898, illegally, Hawaii became a U.S. territory until the American government granted the island's official state status in 1959. Okay, so that's when Hawaii became a state, 1959. Annexation forced Native Hawaiians to learn and speak English. Okay, so, and even at Kamehameha, which is a school for Hawaiians, they couldn't speak Hawaiian, they spoke English. To the first Europeans who landed in Hawaii, the Hawaiian language resembled other island nations, such as the Maori of New Zealand and the people of Tahiti. Since Hawaiians shared their language orally with no written form, white missionaries created a written alphabet of 13 letters based on the sounds they heard when Hawaiian people spoke. It became the most common language on the island, spoken by the government employees and people who came to work the sugar plantations. As Americans took over the islands, English became more widespread. When the U.S. officially annexed Hawaii in 1898, the government banned people from speaking the Hawaiian language in government buildings and schools. For a long time, generations of Hawaiians grew up not knowing their native language. However, thanks to renewed interest in native Hawaiian culture, the language made a comeback in the 1970s and once again became the state's official language in 1978. And that was called the Renaissance period for the Hawaiians. Okay, so now the other thing I want to talk about is the Hawaiians Home Commission Act failed the native residents. Okay, now the sugar plantation owners and ranchers obtained the land from native Hawaiians after overthrowing the Hawaiian government in 1893. At the time, they could own an unlimited amount of land. When the Organic Act passed, creating a new annexation government, it instituted lease terms for sugarcane farmers and plantation owners who had taken over most of the Hawaiian land. Okay? Most were no longer than 30 years total, and around the time many of them were up for renewal or expiring, Congressional Delegate Prince Jonah Kohio Kalanianaoli introduced the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1921. This bill allowed people of more than 50% Native Hawaiian heritage to lease areas totaling more than 200,000 acres of land for 99 years at the cost of $1. So there was a blood quantum. You have to have 50% in order to qualify for Hawaiian homelands. And though Kalanianaoli created the bill to give Native Hawaiians living in poverty the right to their land, property leasers and Republican lawmakers struck illicit deals to create loopholes in transfers. These workarounds ultimately used land intended for Hawaiian homes for airports and other public use entities. More than 1,000 acres went to the new government. Okay, so that wasn't right. Meanwhile, the land allotted to the Hawaiian civilians proved underdeveloped, unworkable, and sometimes inaccessible. As one writer put it, many uses of Hawaiian homelands for public parks and schools violate the intent of the trust. The act set aside no money for improving the land, and in 1999, more than 29,000 native Hawaiians remain on the waiting list today for land. They're still on the waiting list, I think. Still, a lot of people. 29, yeah, there's still a lot of people, and they end up dying. They're still on the list, and they pass away, and they never see that land. That's sad. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is how Hawaiians lived under martial law during World War II. And my mother she experienced Pearl Harbor at that time, and she told me about it, and I'll tell you more about it. But anyway, on December 7, 1941, Japanese planes bombed the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. The attack destroyed almost 20 military vessels and killed over 2,400 people, including some civilians. The National Guard took over as a territorial governor and placed Hawaii under martial law, fearing the contingent of Japanese Hawaii citizens might instigate further attacks. My mom told me about that. When they were under martial law and they had to put at night, they had to put the black paper on the windows and all that kind of stuff. So she told me about it. Now, Hawaii had not yet become a U.S. state, and the government remained suspicious of the islanders during the war, sharply limiting their rights with curfews and forcing them to carry military-issued IDs complete with fingerprints, including the censorship of mail and newspapers. The military also forced some Hawaiians to dig bomb shelters and sent about 2,000 Japanese heritage civilians to work internment camps. In October 1944, the government finally deemed the threat of attack in Hawaii unlikely, thus ending martial law. 2 years later, the Supreme Court ruled the military's actions against civilians unconstitutional. Okay, so that was later. Now the U.S. after the war, military blew up parts of Kaho'olawe Island for years, many years, and there was a lot of protests on that. Hawaii's smallest island served as a penal colony. We talk about Kaho'olawe now. From around 1832 to 1853, and later supported ranchers, farmers, and as many as 50,000 non-native goats. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941, the U.S. military evacuated the inhabitants and turned the entire island into a bombing range. Okay, so they fired missiles at the island's cliffs from ships and submarines to test their weapons, setting off large quantities of nuclear TNT near the shore to simulate the effects of a nuclear blast on nearby ships. Since Native Hawaiians viewed the island as sacred, they considered the military's actions as sacrilegious. Okay, now President Dwight Eisenhower passed a bill in 1953 to return the land to the native people after the military completed weapons testing. The bombings continued into the 1970s, and the Native Hawaiians formed the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana group in protest and occupied the island several times, with one occupation lasting 35 days. 2 men went missing, and one of them was George Helm. He had a beautiful voice. I remember him singing. Went missing while traveling from the island during these protests, putting further pressure on the military to return the land. The U.S. Navy agreed to conserve the island by introducing more plants and working to stop soil erosion. However, it wasn't until the George H.W. Bush administration in 1990 when the bombing ceased. Okay? Now, and the Navy gave control of the island to the state of Hawaii in 2003, but 25% of the island remained uncleared and hazardous. They're still trying to clear it actually today of those ordinances. Tourists, and the next thing I'll talk about is tourists and new residents with money cause massive urbanization. Okay? Now, Hawaii became a U.S. state around the same time the middle class emerged post-World War II. U.S. citizens with enough income to afford a destination vacation, along with easy access to passenger airplanes, propelled tourism to the islands. Hawaiians built resorts, hotels, and golf courses for the influx of tourists, often hiring residents of nearby countries such as the Philippines as workers. Eventually, tourism replaced the sugar industry as one of the biggest contributors to the state's economy. Unfortunately, the development often encroached on beaches and other areas sacred to native Hawaiians, quickly overtaking Hawaii's natural beauty. Okay? Now, people with money also moved to Hawaii, requiring new residential structures as well as places to eat and shop. More people with fewer living spaces meant prices spiked, forcing many Hawaiians out of their homes, which they could no longer afford. Now, and this is the next thing I'll talk about is and I shake my head on this and I can't believe it. The U.S. government doesn't consider Native Hawaiians to be indigenous people. I still shake my head. Congress apologized to Hawaii in 1993 for helping to overthrow a government belonging to the people who didn't want their home ruled by another country. In 2000, Hawaiian Senator Daniel Keakaka created the Native Hawaiian Government Reorganization Act to make stronger amends, also known as the Akaka Bill. The act grants Native Hawaiians the same kinds of rights given to Native Americans and Native Alaskans. Okay? Hawaiian people never gave up their right to sovereignty to anybody. Okay? Now, as of 2018, the U.S. government recognizes Hawaiians as an ethnic minority, not indigenous people. And this one, I shake my head. I cannot believe that. Unlike Native Americans and Native Alaskans, they do not have the right to govern themselves, raise funds through running gambling establishments, or possess rights to the land seized by the government. Though Alaska worked to get this bill passed for 12 years, it never received enough votes to become law. He retired in 2013 and passed away in 2018. I still shake my head on that one. Now, next thing I'm going to talk about is the high rates of obesity and homelessness which exists among the Native Hawaiians. Okay? According to 2017 statistics, almost 40% of Native Hawaiians struggle with obesity. Though all other Pacific Island countries and territories such as Samoa and the Cook Islands share this trend. Researchers believe this strongly correlates with modern food and genetics, the genes which allowed native ancestors to travel long periods without food. Okay. Traditional Pacific Island diets didn't contain the fat, sugar, and carbohydrates now abundant and inexpensive and widely available foods such as potato chips, white bread, and soda. Along with obesity, Native Hawaiians also have high rates of diabetes, psychological stress, and asthma, possibly due to cigarettes. Okay? Now, in 2017, studies also claimed Hawaii had the highest homelessness rate in the United States outside of Washington, D.C. and reportedly Native Hawaiians comprise almost 40% of the homeless population in 2015. Though the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act formed to set aside land for Native people, many remain on waiting lists and cannot afford skyrocketing rents. Okay, now, according to a study, some people offered housing through the program turned it down, citing the homes had inadequate space for their families, as well as were too far away from transportation or their jobs. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is the traditional hula dance, which led to stereotypes and commercialization. In addition to beaches, flower-patterned shirts, and tropical drinks, most people connect hula dancers to Hawaii. The dance has roots in ancient times, taking the place of a written language. Each movement of the hula tells a story, serving as the earliest record of Hawaiian mythology and history. And it's true, the hula was, before a written language, the hula, that's how they communicated and told stories and of the past through the hula. And that's why it's very important to the Hawaiian people. When missionaries came to Hawaii in the 1820s, they outlawed the dance, mandating Native Hawaiians adopt their customs instead. In the 1870s, under the rule of King David Kalakaua, Hawaiian culture made a comeback, and people embraced the hula once more. That's why they have the Merry Monarch Festival on the Big Island in Hilo to honor the King Kalakaua who brought the hula back for the Hawaiian people. Okay. Though the dance is an art form with a long history of tradition, it has become a cultural enterprise in Hawaii. Visitors can attend shows, they can take classes and view the dance as mere entertainment. Some see the female hula dancer complete in a grass skirt and coconut bra as a Hawaiian stereotype, similar to a cigar store Indian. While the hula brought tourists to the islands, it also spawned tiki bar decorations and Halloween customs based on revered ancient traditions. Well, that's it, folks. 240 for so much change in Hawaii and to the Hawaiian people. I just feel so sorry for the Hawaiian people. Anyway, I just hope you enjoyed this video. Mahalo for watching, and ahui ho.